What's happening, everyone? Welcome back to the Ponder podcast with Ruben Gutierrez. I'm Ruben, your host, and today we just have a solo episode. Nice, short, quick. I hope to do more of these, but obviously that's really dependent on you guys. So let me know if you'd like to hear more of these. But today, I'm probably clicking on this because you saw the title, right? I definitely want to talk about how this idea of that there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And I was listening to a podcast where someone was quoting the original quote comes from Thomas Sowell. Um, and he said it during an interview that I watched on YouTube. I'll put that in the show notes below. But I actually didn't hear it originally from Thomas. I originally read it in this book that I have right here. So if you're watching on YouTube, A Hunter Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century by Heather Hying and Brett Weinstein. I listened to their podcast. It's called the Dark Horse Podcast as well. So much respect. They're both evolutionary biologists. And it was the first time that was looking at a lot of what we do in modern society and modern culture, and just life in general and the challenges we go through and things of that nature. It was the first time I was looking at it through a biological lens, right? And one of my favorite chapters, it might be chapter 2 or 3, I have to double check, but is that there's no such thing throughout entire history of life on planet Earth. Every animal, including us, plants, anything you see out there, had to make some sort of sacrifice in the midst of evolution to get what they needed. One example I always like to use when I've talked about this in groups with friends is and I read this in another book called Exercised. I forget the author. We can walk on 2 feet, 2 legs, sorry. 2 feet, what the fuck? Um, 2 legs. And if you believe in the evolution and that we come from primates, primates usually use four, right? They use their front hands to kind of help them move. This gives them a lot of benefits. They can also stand on 2 legs, but not for long, actually. So in that book, I actually learned why we stand on 2 legs. And that reason comes from the fact that they believe, obviously everything is can change at any moment. Science is ever changing, depends on what we find in fossil records and things like that. But we decided, in terms of our evolutionary pathway, to walk on 2 legs because we can carry things. So for long distances, we can carry things for long distances. Also, the reason why we don't have hair like a primate is because we can sweat. So we used to run long distances for hunting. At least this is what is believed currently, based on that book. I think the author is Daniel Lieberman. It's coming back to me. It's called Exercised. Um, so that's the belief. So we can pick up things, put it on our back, and kind of use the fact that we stand up straight to kind of walk. Now, the downside of this is that we are one of the slowest animals, or at least mammals, that exists. Anything on 4 legs, if you have a dog, you can see this, you will never outrun your dog. Now, you can outrun your dog in long distance. A dog will get tired faster than you will, at least a modern day dog. A wolf, good luck. They could run 50 to 60 miles in one day. Um, you can beat a horse though, which was a fun fact I learned from that book. So that's an example of an evolutionary trade-off. And in the book, they mention this idea that there's trade-offs in everything we do. So it exists in the paradigm of biology. And everything in life, if it starts with biology, that means it's going to exist everywhere else, right? Think about it. As we are going through evolution, I'm just looking at my notes here. There are like hundreds, sometimes thousands of competing concerns in any given organism. So as we are moving through our evolutionary line, we do give up certain things, right? We give up the hair that we had that would have kept us warm through winters so that we can sweat and run long distances, as I mentioned before. Um, there's always a trade-off. And they're in their book, they talk about two different trade-offs. There's a allocation trade-off, which is kind of what I mentioned before, which are the most obvious. They're very much well studied and super famous. And the example they give is about a deer. And in order to make a larger set of antlers, something else has to give. So you've either got to borrow that from somewhere else to get bigger antlers. So sometimes some deer will lose bone density and spend down on their reserves just so the antlers can grow bigger. Um, in other ways, they can eat more if they can find food or they're in a very luscious environment. They can eat more and the antlers will grow because they're getting more calories, and then it continues from there. But it also raises many questions as they add here. And I'm going to read this verbatim. If it were that simple and eating more benefited you in this easy way, what prevents you from doing it before? Assuming that something is constraining your diet such that it cannot simply be increased growing bigger antlers, means having less of something else. So you're literally, it's all dependent. It's so contextual on the location, for instance, of that deer to make bigger antlers. So maybe that one just got lucky, right? And luck plays a big factor. And they talk about that in the book as well. Then there's a second version of this called the design constraint. Um, these are more insensitive to supplementation. So basically, you cannot just add more of something to solve the problem. So in the example they use is robustness. So let's just say, being big boned and muscular is valuable in many situations, but you can't maximize both like locomotor effects. So you'll be slow, right? You're sacrificing something for something else. So you can't, even if you have more resources, biologically speaking, you are bigger and muscular and strong, but you miss out on speed. And that's the case of, like, I always think about wolves, for instance. Wolves are agile, they're small, they're very fast, right? And a lot of the game that they hunt can kill them easily because they're so small. So buffalo and things like that. They can, deer can, if it catches them with an antler, that wolf is done. But what wolves have learned to do is be quick to tire their prey out. They work in a pack, so they have a community aspect to it. So the evolutionary line led to some way where they can survive in that sense to make sure that they're successful in that hunt, which most of the time they aren't actually. So these are just the examples. So at the end of the day, trade-offs are unavoidable. And in the book, they really say this has an upside because it just drives the evolution of diversity. So that's why there's so many different kinds of animals. And even us humans are different in many ways because where we lived and where our ancestors came from will depend, right? Like if you have real dark skin, you have more protection against the sun, for instance, versus a much fair skinned person cannot be in the sun for so long because they will get burned, right? So there's that trade-off, for instance, that we went two different ways in that sense. Even though that's just skin color, there are advantages and disadvantages to that as well. So all that to say, I wanted to start with biology because in today's society, and I hear it even from close friends, I hear this idea of like, you can have everything, right? You can have the successful marriage, you can have the successful job or business, you can have great relationships with your family, you can travel all the time, you can do this, you can do that, and you can have it all. But there's only 24 hours in a day, and you have to sleep 8 of those hours to be at least so you won't be cranky and you can actually have a good time in life. 7 of those 8 hours are going to be utilized for sleep. So that gives you only 16 hours in the day. And most of us work a job. So if you're full time, that takes about another 8 hours of your day, which leaves you with 8 hours to play around with. And I would say maybe 1 to 2 of those hours is getting ready, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, making your coffee in the morning, cooking food, eating food, right? I would say almost 2 to 3 of those hours, because if you're eating 3 meals a day, um, yeah, you get my point. So I think it matters more to have this understanding of sacrifice. And I think, and this is where the opinion starts here. Um, and I think that it's really dependent on where we're at in our life. So when you're young, and you've probably seen memes like this, when you're young, you have an abundance of time, right? Like you have so much time. Maybe you're not working. Maybe you're working a part-time job if you're a teenager, but you don't have a lot of money. So you have limited access to things you can do, unless you have like a rich family. And that's very few of us, right, that have that. Your family can help you and support you. I'm pretty sure if you're listening, you probably have parents give you, $20 to head to the movies or something like that. So you can have a good time with your friends, right? But if you were like 15 and like, I want to go travel to Italy and do that for 2 weeks, well, that's not going to be cheap, right? The flight, the hotel, your food, like things you want to do, you want to visit museums and see architecture, the list goes on and on. That's something you may not be able to do unless your family takes you, for instance. And then even then you're limited. So, um, where was I going with that? See, sometimes I just get out of the way. So that's a trade-off that you have to deal with, because as you get older, even though you have more time. I mean, you have more money as you get older on average. You lose that time, because as you grow your company, as you get promoted at work and get more responsibilities, then you might have kids, and just responsibility starts to take over your life. So you become time poor, but you're financially doing well. So you can do the trip to Italy, but now there's so many factors that you have to consider just to make that trip, right? Versus when you were younger, you can just go and do that trip. And some of us do that, right? Like an example is I left and lived in China for a year, right? When I was about 25. And I had to make sacrifices for that, right? Like my family, my partner, things like that. Um, to go and have this experience that I've always wanted. I always wanted to live in another country, and I wanted to do it no matter what. So I didn't let those things stop me at the time. But now, in my healthy age of 32, I have a dog, a cat, right? Like I have a partner who we take care of one another, and we have things together, like our finances are together. Like there's so many different pieces that I have to consider if I was to do something like that again, go out and live in another country for close to a year. So in those senses, there is some sacrifices that need to be made. There is a trade-off, right? There's no solution. I can't, because of the limitations of the human condition, right? We need to sleep, we need to eat. There are those needs that need to be met in order for us to actually do the things that we want to do, right? Especially in today's society where we're probably busier than ever. Like with everything happening, whatever job you have, I'm pretty sure you're not sitting there working 20 hours a week. You're working probably 40, if not more. So we trade things off, right? An example for me currently is that I create content for you guys. So that's building a brand. That's literally my focus right now. Building a brand will get you very, very far, no matter which route you take. And I hope that this is valuable to you guys. If it is, leave a review, do all that good stuff. Thank you. Um, shameless plug. But with that, I rarely have chances to go out and meet new friends or even hang out with the friends I currently have and jump on calls with them. I mean, me and my friends that I jump on calls with, I mean, Jesse being one of them, who used to be a co-host of this podcast, we play phone tag for days at a time sometimes. We have to literally sit there and be like, what's your schedule like, and talk about that, right? Versus when we were younger, we were able to just jump on a call at any time and it'd be okay. So it's things like that. And I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that, at least from what I hear. Maybe you are that person that struggles with making plans with friends, or to live a good life and have friends close to you, because it's a very vital, important part of being a human, is your community. And that starts to wane as you get older because you have a family and again, your job, you get promoted and all these things. So what's the sacrifice, right? And then we haven't even touched on health, which is a major part. If you want to live a really long and fruitful life, health is vital, because you can live a good life being unhealthy. I'm not, there's people that do it. Whether I don't know how they feel, right? I've never been in that situation. But by the time they turn, the ripe old age of 65, 70, they're probably taking several medications. They feel a lot of pain in their body, right? They probably have some form of dis-ease, right? And that's a majority of America. At least I'm speaking from the sense of America. Not entirely sure how it is in other parts of the world. I'd be curious to learn from you guys. But these folks here in America, at that age, they feel like it's done, it's over. They try to retire. They have less energy. There's so many things, and mostly it's because they didn't really take care of themselves when they were younger. Health is a long term thing. It's something that you never stop doing. Eating healthy, you never stop that. Yeah, you have your days here and there where you have a good time, have drinks, and go out with friends and have fried food and all that stuff. Great. That's actually, I think, believe it's good for your body to go through that every now and again. So it stays adaptable. Um, but for the most part, you want to stay strong by lifting heavy weights so your bones stay strong and they don't break when you're old. And then you want to eat nutritious meals so that you have all the vitamins, nutrients, and minerals that you need, um, so your body can do all the functions it needs, especially when it comes to hormone production, which is more important than a lot of people think. If you're a man, testosterone; if you're a woman, estrogen, progesterone, and many others. So, you know, there's always a trade-off. And if you're one of those people, and it's sad to say, that is trying to have everything and find balance, is really no sense of balance. If anything, there's always chaos. You can create order out of that chaos, which is something that Jordan Peterson talks deeply about. But once you find it, again, your experiences of life will change, which means you have to shift your values. You have to shift what you prioritize, right? Maybe you're single, where you prioritize you. You can take care of your health. You can control a lot of parts of your life because you're by yourself, right? But once you get at another individual and you have a partner, or husband, wife, whatever, that changes, because now your care is not only yourself, take care of yourself for someone else. I truly believe, put your oxygen mask on first before anyone else, but you're doing that for someone else too, right? And now when you make decisions, you have to consider that other person in your decisions, right? And then you add children to the mix, and that becomes a whole nother thing. I don't have children, so I'm not entirely sure, but you have to think about them and their future. So you're not only thinking about them at that present moment, you're thinking about them 18 years from now, 20 years from now. You want to provide them with the proper mindset and tools so they can live successfully through this crazy thing called life, and be ready for anything that may come up in their lifetime, right? I'm a millennial and have dealt with, excuse me, have dealt with 9/11 and the Iraqi war, 2008 recession, now a pandemic, and now we're pretty much in another recession. Like, we've been going through this. a lot of what we had, and this goes into the economic piece. Like, we had so much great growth and amazing things happening for so many years. So many people made millions of dollars. We have the most millionaires, billionaires we've ever had in history. And now we're seeing, oh, like that lasted an X amount of time, but now it's time for the dip to occur. Hey, at the end of the day, life is filled with hills and valleys, ups and downs. It's in the fabric of this 3D realm that we live in. And it's something that you cannot control. For every decision you make, you need to look at the ramifications of that decision, because it's going to harm something. When you buy something, you're giving money to an organization that you don't know what that organization is doing unless you do proper research. And even the best ones have things that they don't do, right? The best ones usually don't pay their employees well, which is a thing that I've noticed. And I always say, there's a quote that's been sticking with me for quite some time, and that's that the truth always lies in the middle, right? I know currently it's August. Let me check. August 22nd on Monday. Um, and right now we're going through a huge political discourse. We've been going through it for quite some time now, since the Trump era. And you have your strong opinions on the left and strong opinions on the right. And then you have those in the middle who kind of lean one way or another. I always consider myself a middle person, with closer to the left, but like agree with a lot of things on the right, and disagree with a lot of things on both ends. So I always say the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So when someone is coming to you, even me talking to you right now, it's like, hey, this trade-off idea, right? It can seem very, very strong opinion, where I'm like, there's no balance. There's only trade-offs. You got to make sacrifices all the time. Like, that's what you're doing. Every decision you make, you're making a sacrifice elsewhere. You know, the new job you're getting may sound amazing on paper, right? You went through an interview process, right? It's going well. You're like, every person you've met are, they're so amazing. The culture seems amazing. You talk to people who work outside of the, you've gotten on calls with people that work for the company, and they all, they've told you the truth and told you that it's great. Then you go in there and you realize that some parts, maybe they don't have the right systems, and you're like, this makes things inconvenient. Or maybe their leadership is kind of lacking. Or maybe your coworkers aren't what you thought they were, right? Because we all wear a certain face and mask when we go into the workplace, right? I was going to say office, but nowadays people are remote, so I don't know. So, somewhere along those lines, when you make a decision, you have to think of the ramifications of that decision and be okay with that decision. And one of the ones, and I'll bring Karina back on, because I want to, see it from both ends of a woman, and my end is when you get into a relationship, it's so easy to go on an app and find someone else, especially if you're a fairly attractive person, and you take care of yourself. It's not too hard to find somebody, to be honest. At least that's been an experience of mine in the past. If it's not the experience for you, I love to chat, and hit me up on Instagram. I love to hear your story. But in a relationship, you're making sacrifices. When you decide to become monogamous with one person and be with that one person only, there are things that you're not going to like about that person, because there's someone different from you. And even if you were to date someone who's almost like you, you're like, yes, this works out for us, you're going to begin to loathe and resent that person because they're too much like you. So either way, as humans, we're really, really never really happy, right? Once we get everything we want, and you hear this from the most successful people, they start to feel depressed because they got everything they want. Let's deal with that, right? Everyone has their own different stories, and some people go on a spiritual journey. They find themselves through Buddhism or something along those lines. Religion. Some people go into religion. They need to find meaning. We're definitely meaning making machines. And when you can understand that, and that there is this sacrifice, or at least some sacrifices in every decision you make, it kind of frees you a little bit. It frees you to know that whatever decision you make, you can be okay with that decision. Because a lot of us freeze, and I noticed that in our current society. And I think Generation Z, if you're part of them, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to grab someone and bring them on the podcast about what they're going through. Because I think for them, decisions are not going to be easy. They're going to have a lot to fix. I mean, I think we say that about every generation, to be honest. There's a great book called The Fourth Turning, which goes through all these generations and how we repeat these cycles. It's mind blowing because they did mention that something big was going to happen in like between 2020 and 2022. And we had a pandemic. Now we're going through this recession thing, the economy and supply chain issues and all these things. And they wrote this book in the 80s. So just an idea of like, and they're economists. So they're not like spiritual woo woo people. Don't get me wrong, I'm a spiritual woo woo person, but I try to, use my left brain and be very practical in a lot of ways. Um, until like I'm at a loss, and then I know I gotta stick to my spirituality and dig into that. And if that's, if currently you feel lost because the world is a shit show, I definitely highly recommend digging into some spirituality or finding something that kind of speaks to you. It doesn't have to be a typical religion, Catholicism or Christianity. It can be, one of the Eastern traditions. Um, I'm a big advocate for psychedelic medicine, but make sure that you do it the right way to figure these things out, because I truly believe we cannot do it alone. Find good friends. Um, and that's the thing about decisions we make and the ramifications before you make decisions. If you have good friends near you who can speak on all aspects, like, hey, if I make this decision, what do you think will be good for it? This is what I think. And what do you think may be the ramifications of that decision? Give me the honest truth and gather that data. You're gathering data in a sense and with that, you make a decision based on that. You go to people you trust, and also you trust yourself, right? um I just had that recently with a friend. So, it was nice to see that I was able to support him in many, many ways, based on the experiences I know when it comes to relationship dynamics and things like that. But it's definitely something that we have to consider. And the fact that it comes strictly from biology, right? And we started there before we were even able to speak, right? It just shows that in our culture, we have to do the same and see with every decision we're making as a society, what are the ramifications of those decisions? Because there will be some, and it will be uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially when you talk about people in power and the decisions they're making and the amount of people it affects, um, all the way down to middle income to low income folks, right? So that's all I got for y'all today, folks. I truly enjoyed this. I would love to do more of these. Obviously, it's up to you, and come out with more of them. So please let me know. Shoot me a message on IG. All my links to that are below. You can check out my Substack, where I usually take some of this from there and expand on the articles that are right there. And yeah, let me know what you'd like to see more of. I know y'all listening. Really enjoyed the episode recently with Karina based on the data that I saw. So we'll have more of those coming. But let me know. Um, and yeah, I won't say any more. There's no need, right? We talked about it. So there are no solutions, only trade-offs. I hope that can help you at least in some of this craziness that's happening in this world and coming from an understanding. Um, so I'm leaving you stuff to think about, and that's the point of this podcast, right? To ponder on. So ponder on that. What are the trade-offs that are currently occurring in your life? And if you feel like you're not going the right way, who are those people you can come to, right? So Much love, y'all. I appreciate you listening or watching if you're on YouTube. And we'll see you and hear from you next week. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.